This week in IT SPARC Cast, ChatGPT finds a new stash of magic mushrooms. Shadow AI tells Shadow IT to hold my beer. And SSL certs are about to have the lifespan of a tsetse fly. Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Today's theme is all about automation, even though you don't know that yet. Let's go see what's going on out there.
It's Friday, the 25th of April. IT SPARcast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years experience working in IT or for IT vendors.
Quick programming note. IT SPARcast is off next week for kids' spring break vacation. We'll release top 10 episodes, and we may also release some special content for Friday. We'll see if we can get some time to edit that thing down.
But now, for the news bites.
All right. Once again, let's talk about the news. And this is an interesting one that comes to us via Slashdot and Computer World. Well, let me cut to the chase here. The CA Browser Forum have voted to slash cert lifespans from the current lifespan of 1 year to 47 days. Right now, to me, 47 days is a little bit of a weird one. That reminds me of like ATM, right? Why did you do what's special about 47? So let's talk about what this means and what's going on. This controversial change has been debated extensively for more than a year. So the group's argument is that this will improve web security in various ways. But there's other arguments that the group's members have a strong alternative incentive and they will be the ones earning more money due to this acceleration. So remember when I talked about automation? Look, if you are actually hand upgrading your certs, okay, you need to come up with a new method. Period. You've got to automate now. You're done with this. You do not have time to deal with the cert because with a 47-day period, you're going to be updating once a month. This isn't going to cut in directly immediately. So the changes are set to phase in. They're going to phase in such a way that you're going to drop down to, say, a 6-month cert refresh sequence, and then you're going to go down to the 1 month, right?
Yeah.
So in roughly 1 year, March 15th of 2026, maximum TLS certification lifespan shrinks to 200 days, right? So that's 180 day cycle with some grace period, right? And then this accommodates that cadence, and then it reduces from there to the 47 day, which you can think of as 30 days plus, why it wasn't 45 days, I have no idea, but it's their magic number. So basically what drove this is a core argument from Apple, from what we've been able to determine, and that the longer durations give far too much time for bad things to happen. So there's something to that. If you are not paying attention to your cert authority, if you're not paying attention to who's coming and who's going, your cert company could go out of business. You wouldn't even know it. Right? And at this point, your cert is now compromised. So, you dig into Apple's argument was that certificates are a representation of a point of time in reality, right? And that point of certificate issuance, everything's certified and correct for the process followed for that certification is accurately documented at that point in time. So what Apple is trying to say is that our threat environment is changing fast enough. 1 year isn't going to cut it anymore. And I think there's something to that argument. I mean, when the group voted for it, nobody voted no. There were some abstains. I think it's a solid argument. The challenge becomes, what are we going to do about this? Because Apple is basically saying, look, CAs do not always do their job perfectly. And we know this. We're dealing with companies. We're dealing with humans. It's not all computer algorithms. There are mistakes made. And if a mistake is made, you're talking about a TLS connection. TLS, we need to trust a certain level of encryption. And we're going to talk more about this later. I have another really good article on this. But this is a challenge. My takeaway from this and how it's going to impact you, my friends who are out here in the professional world doing this, you must now automate this. If you're not automated now, get automated. Also, check your vendors. John, you have any input on this?
Yeah, so I think you're 100% on when it comes to the automation. I think I have 2 points here. The automation is critical because of all of the tasks I've ever done in any kind of IT related role, the generating and management of certs has always been the most convoluted, confusing, pain in the butt process. And I always have to go look it up every single time and make sure I'm following instructions. And I always make a mistake and have to backtrack. It just because I don't. First of all, I just don't do it that often. But so automating it's going to be key anyway. But if you're doing it every 30 days or so, then nobody's got time for that, and it's just going to become like a task that you dread. So you definitely need to automate it. The other one is that that this is going to have to increase additional levels of security, because one of the areas of attack I see possible coming at this is if a company does go out of business that's generating your search. So let's just say not going to name anybody, but let's say you go into XYZ certs as your CA, and they go out of business, and maybe they sell, and you're not paying attention to the news, and whoever buys them. Now, I mean, this is probably an edge case. It's theoretical. It's an edge case. Probably isn't going to happen, but it's in the theoretical realm of possibility. And now they're signing your certs and providing certs that maybe are less secure, maybe more nebulous, and maybe it provides a different vector for attack now because they're less scrupulous organization, or a malicious organization, even worse. So that's a concern I have there on that one. But overall, I think this will increase security. We'll have to see how it goes.
Well, Apple made a good point on this. I'd like to close it up with this, and this ties into some other stuff we're going to talk about. Apple added that the shorter certificate lifespans also allow the industry to more effectively react to changes in cryptography.
Yeah.
Right. So I've been watching the TLS 1.3 rollout. For folks who don't know, TLS 1.3 is the first TLS standard that doesn't allow you to do an intermediate cert extension. So a lot of times man-in-the-middle attacks were built into SSL and TLS to allow load balancing and other stuff to happen. John and I have worked in the WAN optimization space. John, you were on the coding side of this. That is one of the tricks you use to optimize a control, but it's also a security hole. And I've noticed that TLS 1.3 is rolling out a lot more slowly than it should be. But as I'm going to explain in the article after next, changes are coming to cryptography. And Apple's point about allowing us to change more quickly for cryptography is a very valid one. But thinking about things that are solid versus about things that are getting somewhat nebulous, what do you got?
There we go. So it turns out that some of the newer models from OpenAI, some of the newer models of ChatGPT, are showing increased signs of hallucination. So we know that hallucinations are always a problem when it comes to LLMs, but they seem to have been getting better. So the early models from ChatGPT 3 and 3.5 were notorious for hallucinations. And what hallucinations are inaccuracies in the claims that come from the LLM. And they will make a bold statement, and they will be stated as factual with authority in their comment, but be completely wrong. They will say that a governor is a certain person who happens to not be the governor, or they will give you the facts that there are 2 R's in strawberry when there are 3, or other comments along those lines. And those are what are known as hallucinations. But what we have found is that recently with OpenAI's O3 and O4 mini specifically, that we're seeing an increase in the number of hallucinations, which had been going down. And so what we're seeing is that O3 is hallucinating 33% of responses include some level of hallucination, and O4 mini, 48% of responses include hallucinations, whereas O1 includes only 16% of their responses have hallucinations. And that's according to Persona QA in their benchmark tests. And another set of tests from a group called Transluce which is an open testing organization, they're showing that part of this is coming because the O3 is making fabrications due to the fact that they're actually including more claims per response. So as you are saying, on average, 10 claims per response versus an average of 6.5 in GPT-4o. So as you make more claims in a response, you have more chances to hallucinate. So that's why you're seeing an increase in hallucinations in those new models. So this is a really interesting piece where as the LLMs are trying to be more complete in their answers and to give you more data and getting more into the research side of things and doing more searching, they're actually getting it more wrong. So we're finding, for example, that GPT-4o is finding 90% accuracy on some of the simple QA testing, but we're seeing this troubling trend. So this is something that we need to be aware of, and you need to be aware of, because just about everybody listening to this is using AI to some degree in your day-to-day job. I use it daily. Lou uses it daily. And what we keep saying is, first of all, this is proof that AI is not going to take your job, as we've been saying, but somebody using AI could take your job. But AI can also get you fired. Right. And so you need to be really aware of that, of check the facts before you present them. Check what the output is. And Lou and I are talking pre-show that not only does AI get things wrong, but you can actually gaslight it and tell it. I had a conversation with AI about the governor of New Hampshire, and I questioned on something, and it changed its mind, and then turned out that it was wrong after I questioned it. It changed its mind to something that was incorrect. So it was kind of crazy on how that kind of thing can work. So check your facts as you get them. Don't trust what gets spit out of an LLM. It's just really important.
It really is. And John is 100% right. We absolutely do use LLMs in our day-to-day. And it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, well, here's this oracle, right? It is like a computer, a thought amplification tool. That doesn't mean it thinks. At least in its current iteration, it is a thought amplifier. You can use it as sort of a filter if you know how to ask the right questions, which is really important. That's kind of what we do with a web browser and a search engine, right? It's a filter that goes directly to the piece of information we think we want. But what an AI does is it says, well, this is what they're asking, but are they sure they know what they're asking? And that's why it's so powerful, but also why it's so dangerous. So, folks, our job is to get better, is to try to offload. The automation is all about offloading the drudge work, right? It's about automating the certs. It's about increasing the encryption. It's about making sure that you know what the threat environment looks like, or your application behavior, or is your application meeting your users' needs. AIs can help a lot with that. But the final determination on changes, architecture, direction, even day-to-day decisions is going to stop here,
right,
in your frontal lobes.
So I want to hear two things from the listeners. One is, what do you think can be done to help with these hallucinations? How can the developers of these AI tools do a better job to prevent these hallucinations? But also, do you have any funny stories of how an AI may have hallucinated and then you've caught it? Or maybe you didn't catch it, and even that might be even funnier story. Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com, or hit us up on X at IT SPARC Cast, or if you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. We would love to hear your comments.
Absolutely.
And with that, Lou, you love quantum, so why don't you take us to our next story?
I'm a very quantum person. If you know where I am, you don't know where I'm going. No, that's not true. I'm not an electron. So this comes to us via Wall Street Journal. Definitely a place I like to keep track of, because where money's concerned, their science is a lot of fun, right? And in a first, scientists sent quantum messages a record distance over a traditional network. It's the title of this. So the breakthrough brings down the cost of quantum communication and integrates it into advanced existing infrastructure. Now, this is the difference between AI and digging, right? I'm really into this stuff. So, what the Wall Street Journal article is, it's a good article, and I would recommend you go look at it. But they're in a way they ordered this incorrectly. The deal is that, and this relates to our earlier cert discussion in this show, that the idea of using algorithmic ciphers that are based on prime numbers and elliptical curves is sort of being looked at with a great deal of alarm right now. Why? Because for a brute force attack, if I'm going after it, and you've heard us discuss this a couple times with the von Neumann machine, where I'm going to have to go in and do a sequence, try a number, a sequence, try a number, a sequence, try a number. It takes the heat death of the universe to try enough numbers, no matter how fast your computing is. Quantum technology is different. And if I could put it this way, a collapsing quantum state, which has multiple variables in it, kind of can collapse on the answer all at once. And it's mind-bending. You think about your AI eating mushrooms is weird. This is way weirder. All right? What happens is the quantum state collapses to the answer. It means, in theory, as far as we know, you can crack a key instantly with quantum computing. So, hence Apple's concern about being able to get advanced ciphers out there. So what do we do? Well, one of the things you can do is use a quantum cipher. A quantum cipher would be sort of a token of a quantum state. But that can't be sent in binary, right? It's a quantum state. So how do you do this? Up until now, what's been going on is you will analyze a single photon. You can encode a quantum state into a single photon, a single particle, wave of light, depends on which physics you follow, but we can measure it. The problem is it's really freaking expensive. The stuff you use to measure that is like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. You got to supercool it to liquid nitrogen temperatures. It's very bulky. I've dealt with this type of equipment before in a previous life. When you're running around with oxygen sensors in your area, oops, if the nitrogen gets out or the helium gets out, you might die. This is probably not going to be widespread deployable. So basically what happened is this. In a published paper in Nature on Wednesday of this week, Dr. Mirko Patoja at Toshiba Europe sent a quantum information pulse, a quantum information state through regular computers, so through a regular fiber, by using a different type of detector. So I can send that state. These detectors are called avalanche detectors, avalanche diodes. And I'm not going to get into the quantum physics of how they work. Stuff's all quantum. That's why we call it solid state. But essentially, it's about an order of magnitude less sensitive, but it's also several of orders of magnitude cheaper. And what they managed to do is move a quantum cipher by using an intermediary over 158 miles. So obviously, I had to do a little digging because, we're geeks. We look at the interfaces on this stuff. We're like, okay, where did they put this, right? Obviously, they put it right on the fiber. They had to, because they're sending. So think of it as an intermediate encryptor. You would come off of your interface, run into the encryptor system. This is a lot like MACsec in a way, except quantum. And the problem is holding together that pulse in the fiber, because speed changes depending on frequency, and then detecting it without too much noise, they had to run an intermediate thing. But the thing about this is sufficient for a metro area network. So you could set up, if you're in a single metro area, you could set up quantum encryption all around. And that is a breakthrough, and you could afford it. The sensors they're using to analyze that single photon that gives you that quantum state that sets your encryption they can't get it. They can't get the entire state with one sensor. So what they did is they stacked a sensor analysis on top of it. They grab the state and then they denoise it with a second one. And this is a huge breakthrough because while this is expensive, it's in the thousands of dollars right now, but it operates at room temperature. You don't have to cool to liquid helium temperatures. And I could foresee this being iterated enough times that it could actually be built into an interface. So, if you look at what we just talked about with them extending certs, a lot of this starts to make sense. People appear to be very, very worried about quantum key breaking becoming mainstream. And if they're worried about it, that tells me that somebody's found somebody doing it.
Yeah, we're real close. If
Yeah,
we're
we're
not there,
real
we're
close.
real close.
So keep an eye on this thing. Keep an eye on this.
I got a name for this product.
Oh,
Quacksec.
don't look at it too closely. You'll change the state.
That's right. That's right. All right,
Speaking
we're going to
of
move on.
shadowy things.
That's right. So if you've spent any time in IT at all, you know the term shadow IT. Well, there's a new branch of shadow IT. It's called shadow AI. And there's a group called Software AG, and they did a study in October of 2024 of 6,000 information workers in the US, UK, and Germany. And what they found were over half of these information workers were using unsanctioned AI. And this is mirroring shadow IT, and they're now referring to this as shadow AI. So as part of this study, they found that 75% of knowledge workers in general are using AI, and 50% are using unapproved tools for tasks like drafting email or coding. And 46% of those shadow IT users said that they would continue to use those AI tools despite employer bans and or similar shadow IT rules. So meaning that even if they get caught, even if they're told, no, you can't use ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or Grok or whatever it might be, they're going to continue to do so and find ways around it. They'll jump off the network, they'll jump onto their cell, they'll whatever it's going to be, they'll continue to use it. 83% of these people cite benefits, including time saving, ease of use, and productivity gains. So they're saying, this is making my life easier. And as you've heard me say, I've got the rule of three when it comes to information security, which is it can be easy, it can be cheap, or it can be secure. You can pick two. What this means is that we're not, as IT professionals, we're not making it easy for people to do their jobs with AI. And we know that AI is enhancing people's ability to do their jobs. So we as IT professionals need to take this seriously, and we need to figure out how to give our information workers the AI tools they need or want to do their job. So, and that means not saying, no, you can't use them. It's, oh, here is the best tool to do your job. You're a coder, use this tool. You are an accountant, use this tool, and give them multiple options. And if you're getting pushback, and if people decide they want to use ChatGPT instead of Copilot, or if people want to use Grok instead of Perplexity, find out why. And either help that tool become secure and standardized, or educate them on why it's not the best tool. That is our job as IT. Just as Lou and I have lectured so many IT people about remote work, this is something that we all need to take seriously, because it falls on us, the IT professionals, to make this not put us on the front page of the newspapers because our data got out because somebody decided to use an unsanctioned AI. And if they're doing it with an unsanctioned AI, that means that they're willing to go to something that's not an OpenAI or a Grok or Perplexity. They're going to go to some shady AI tool, DeepSeek, something else
like that,
where that data could definitely get out, and then that's your corporate data, and now we've got a problem.
Well, here's the challenge, in my opinion. So the folks that are mostly selecting the tools are IT, or it's driven from the C-suite. How do you interface with these things? How does it change? And one thing I have noticed in time is that there are certain LLMs I prefer to interact with and certain ones I don't. And it has to do with the way I approach problems. We don't all approach problems the same way. Although in our separate subsectors, it's pretty accurate to say if you're in IT, you're something of a geek, right? There's a little bit of geek in you, or a lot in my case, John's case, but it's there. Versus accounting, and I know this because I married an accountant, a money person, different thought pattern. Marketing, different thought pattern. QA, different thought pattern. So the problem you end up with is that people are going to find tools that they mesh with well.
Right.
And they're going to go do this on their own because they can't wait for you. There's too much there's too much changing too quickly to wait for you to make up your mind. So you're going to need to make up your mind quickly, rule out and block anything you know is bad, right? Look for signs of it in your network, which is why John and I are always going to be on about having a multi-layered security system. If you are not watching what's hitting your DNS, you're screwed.
Yep.
Okay, you're done. You need to be doing online packet analysis of your network, or else you have no idea what's going on.
100%. Yeah, you need to be using policy and network management and really analyzing what's going on. And this really isn't any different than any other shadow IT situation.
Exactly.
At the last company that Lou and I were at, the art department within marketing was using Box instead of OneDrive because the company that got acquired that they all worked for was using Box officially. And they just didn't want to move off of it because they liked the way it worked. It wasn't that OneDrive had anything inherently bad about it. It's just that they were already using something. And nobody ever did anything about it. And this is the same kind of situation. Maybe I got hired and I was already using ChatGPT as my main interface tool. And I don't want to use Copilot because I don't know Copilot. Well, you got to help me get there, right? You got to explain to me why Copilot's better if it is. And if it's not, then why are you trying to force me to use Copilot?
Well, I mean, that comes down to licensing and Office.
Okay, but
Windows
you
365.
can, again, it can be easy, it can be cheap, or it can be secure. Which ones are you choosing? And I'll tell you what, if you're forcing me to not use the one that's easy for me, it's not going to be secure because I'm using my tool. So that's a problem.
I hate to say this, you're going to have to throw cheap out the window. You're screwed.
Every single time you have to throw cheap out the window.
Screwed if you go the cheap route.
All right, we're gonna wrap that one up, and this is gonna bring us to our next one, and it's a really interesting one and kind of scary. It's time for the CVE of the week. The CVE of the week is our weekly segment where we pick a common vulnerability and exposure entry that you need to know about and mitigate ASAP. And when we say ASAP, this time we really mean it because Lou has found something pretty crazy. Lou, go ahead and scare us.
I don't know if this is crazy. I'm not going to give you a straight up CVE. What we really try to do on this show is get you into the meta, right? There are all sorts of different vulnerabilities out there that I could talk about. But really, me harping on a vulnerability, well, let me show you why I will often not do that. Okay, so I got this via Hacker News. I really like them, by the way. Thanks, guys. You're out there watching this. Thank you very much. You do a good job. I recommend you go and you check them out. But so they've been keeping track of how many CVEs are exploited versus when they're released. Right? So this quarter, Q1 of 2025, 159 CVEs were exploited and 28.3% within 24 hours of disclosure. Okay, so that right there should tell you why I only jump on a specific CVE if I'm seeing like, oh my God, there's a whole bunch of people out there that probably don't know they have this, right? I will go to that. By the time you are seeing this, if a CVE was released right now while we are recording this, John does most of does all of our editing. He does a great job. His turnaround is fantastic. It's still 30% of you are going to be hit by this thing. So basically within 28% within 1 day of the disclosure, Vulncheck said in a report shared with Hacker News, that's 48 security flaws that have been weaponized in real world attacks within a day of disclosure. 14 other flaws have been exploited within a month, while another 45 flaws were abused within the span of a year. So really, you need to be working on that 24-hour to 1 week. You really need to button that thing down tight. A majority of the exploited vulnerabilities have been identified in content management systems, followed by network edge devices, operating systems, open source software, and server software. So basically, it breaks down to, at that 159 I gave you for this quarter, 35 of those were in content management systems, so a lot of them WordPress and stuff like that. Network edge devices, 29. So thinking about stuff like home routers or firewalls. Operating systems, 24 shots straight up against them. Open source software was 14, and server software was 14. The leading vendors and their products that were exploited during the time period: Microsoft Windows, 15, VMware, 6, Cyber Power Panel, 5. That sounds like a IoT hack. Lightspeed Technologies, 4, Toto Link Routers, 4. So the key point here is, if you haven't set up an automated notify me if something's going on here network, you need to do that. You need to get that set up. In the case of open source software, by the time these things are announced, there is a patch, right? I run Linux boxes. They always want to get that patch pushed out before the announcement hits. So if you're using like a Debian-based box, you should be every day apt-get update, apt-get upgrade, right? Don't wait for it to alert you or set auto upgrades or whatever, because these things, 30% are attacked. 28.3, I'm going to call it 30, within a day, 24 hours. So as soon as that alert drops, as soon as that security code drops, patch it.
Well, Lou, that goes to your automation comment from the previous article, from a little while ago we talked about, is you just need to turn on the auto updates. And that should be on everything you have, from your phone to your servers. And we know that there are issues with that, and there's compatibility issues with that. But getting pwned is way worse than worrying about the compatibility issue sometimes. And we gotta get to that point. And then we need to apply pressure to our vendors to stop creating these compatibility issues, because we're going to start pushing every patch that we get sent. We're going to take them. We're going to put them into place. So don't create these compatibility issues anymore. Right? There's got to be this kind of feedback loop in that situation. So that's what I take for that. But
there's an interesting development in here that I didn't talk about in recent ones, but recently Microsoft announced that they're going to start live patching a lot of their stuff. Now, Linux went to this a couple years ago. That will essentially allow you to patch the kernel without taking the system down. It's interesting stuff. If you ever get a chance, take a look at it, how they do it. But if you're not looking at live patching right now, you absolutely need to be. It's usually a cost enhancement. So if you're pushing open source and you don't have like a Canonical or an IBM Red Hat maintenance contract, you may want to look into this, because it gives you the ability to not only bring in a patch, but pull it back out again. The same is true for advanced package management on Linux boxes. You can bring it in and pull it back out if it blows everything up. But a lot of folks don't explore that because they're like, I patched it, good enough, right? Take some time, just like you would test your backup plan and do a recovery, test your emergency plan. And Lord knows we've seen plenty of people who haven't done that. Test backing out software.
Yeah.
So that you get comfortable with pushing software quickly, because if you don't, as you can see, you got a big problem.
100%. All right. And that's going to bring us to the mailbag.
Woohoo!
And we got a great email from longtime listener Tim. And matter of fact, Tim's been with us since episode 1, which aired as part of the Daily Tech News Show Experiment Week. And he had a great question. It was actually a fairly long email, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he sent a note in response to our comments about TP-Link, which we've talked about multiple times, but last week we talked about TP-Link trying to make NICE move into the U.S., become a U.S.-based company, and one of its founders become a U.S. citizen to kind of separate from China a bit. And really, the net of the conversation was, what do you recommend for gear instead of TP-Link if we're not going to use TP-Link? And so that led actually Lou's idea, and I like this, is to set up a deep dive where we actually discuss this as a topic. And right now what we're thinking of, and just to give you a little insight into this, is to kind of take as a three-phased approach, is who's the target that you're talking to? Is it yourself? So somebody that owns their own pocket protector. So then that would be, something with a lot more nerd knobs. Is it a friend who you're just going to make a recommendation to? Go buy this and set it up. Or is it your mom, where you're going to be their IT support system, where you're going to have to get into it and help, whether in person or remote? And so that's really the three different buckets we're going to be looking at that. And we're going to have basically three different types of recommendations. There may or may not be more than three options in there, but that'll be the kind of the way we're looking at it. So I think it's a great deep dive that we'll be working on over the next several weeks, and we'll release that. So thank you, Tim, for doing that. Lou already sent a response to Tim. It was a great response, but I want to thank Tim for sending that out. But we do want to hear from you on that, and that is going to cover this episode. And we couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you, and we really do love getting feedback from you, hearing what you think, getting your both critical and positive feedback. So do you have a topic you want us to cover? Do you have anything you want us to do a deep dive on? Do you have questions, or do you think that we maybe got something wrong? Send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com. Hit us up on X at itsparkcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment down below. We read every single piece of feedback and comments that we get, and we respond to most. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That's really going to help us grow and make sure that you don't miss any of the content that we release.
You don't want to miss this insanity.
You don't want to miss this insanity. If you feel that this insanity is valuable and that you're being entertained by it, tell your friends and colleagues about it so that they can get the same insanity that you're getting and that they can get the same information. So with that, we're going to turn you back to your day. Remember, it's going to be 2 weeks before we release another news edition of this thing so that I can go spend some time at the pool with the kids. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. Take care.
Thank you very much.